Welcome back to Comic Krackle. I'm your host, Kirby, and you're watching Motherbox News. This is a new series that we'll be doing on the channel, recapping and analyzing the new issues of The New Gods by Ram V Evan Cagle. Issue 1 begins with a 4-page introduction illustrated by Jorge Fornes. The narration is a quote by Himon detailing what the Source is, as well as what it means to the Fourth World. It shows Metron approaching the Source Wall and being blasted with a beam of light. Now, before we can go forward, we do need to talk about Himon. Himon first appeared in Mr. Miracle number 9, written, drawn, and edited by Jack Kirby. This issue not only shows how Scott-Free was able to break out of Apocalypse, but the issue also shows how Himon was a revolutionary character and figure on Apocalypse. Himon was the first of the New Gods that was able to not only understand the Source, but also harness it. Now, I've been referencing the Source a lot, and you might be familiar with it through the Source Wall, but it's an overarching concept within the Fourth World. The Source can be broken down between life and anti-life. Life is hope, anti-life is despair, and the Source requires balance. So, you know, in Star Wars with the Force, it's basically like that, and a lot of the concepts within Star Wars are directly lifted not only from the Fourth World, but Dune as well. So the opening of the first issue basically is a showcase of how Metron was able to understand this new prophecy. The prophecy is a direct response to the death of Darkseid in DC All-In Special number 1. The Source is trying to reestablish the balance in the wake of Darkseid's death. So it says that there's a child on Earth that's going to be born and sway the balance between life and anti-life. The way that the prophecy is shown is one of the most beautiful pages rendered by Evan Cagle. Deeply detailed lining and a rendering that makes you almost understand what Metron might be experiencing. It's absolutely beautiful and I love it. Going forward from the prophecy, we then see New Genesis with Lightray and Fastback racing to the capital. It then transitions to Highfather being met by Metron. In this issue, Metron is played as cold and reserved, as well as seemingly playing both sides. This is a continuation of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, where you could never really tell his alliances. So Metron appears and he gives the news to Highfather, telling him of this baby that's a possibility to be just as bad or worse than Darkseid. When Metron is giving Highfather the new prophecy, he has an offhand remark that I wanted to look into just a bit deeper. He says, "Perhaps you mourn him more than you like," referring to Darkseid and Highfather's reaction to his death. So I asked Ram V how he would describe the relationship between Darkseid and Isaiah, also known as Highfather, and he said,
"They're obviously in opposition to each other, right? I mean, there's no questioning that. But thinking of that equation in a dialectic sense, perhaps that opposition has also become definitive for them. It was Avia's death, and so Darkseid's actions that sent Isaiah, the inheritor, on his journey of discovering the Source, and thus becoming the Highfather we see today. Much as we comment on the duality of the Great Darkness and the First Light, the Source, we see the duality of Highfather and Darkseid in a similar way. There's no way to objectively define one without the other, and I think world mythologies in general embrace this duality as a matter of existence. I like that dimension to the characters. Without it, they become flat affirmations of good and evil. Good stories for me cause you to ask questions. There's no room for questions in black and white, good and evil. But what if the good was only good because there was an evil to fight? What if the evil was only evil because it resented the good? These make for more interesting stories. And going back to drawing from Hindu mythology, I was always struck by how these were never black and white areas in those stories. Ravana, who's very much the villain of the Ramayana, is presented as a beloved king with many admirable qualities, so much so that he's granted gifts and boons by gods, not something you'd generally associated with bad or evil. And so Isaiah and Darkseid's relationship for me represents my own ideas on good and evil, how easy it is to blur the line between the two, and how hard it is to define one without the other, especially as you zoom out and start talking in the realms of gods. So Metron's comment is a reflection of that. Highfather, while good, perhaps is also at a loss to define himself without Darkseid's presence. And Metron knows just exactly how to poke at that button when he speaks.
When given this news, Highfather asks for his champion, and when Lightray appears, Highfather says, "Not you, child, not for this task," and then calls for Orion. Now this is interesting because of The New Gods by Jack Kirby. In that series, Lightray was kind of in over his head to actually take on the forces of Darkseid, and he was kind of seen as too royal to actually be a soldier of war. Now Highfather calls for Orion because really Orion is the champion of New Genesis, but also the son of Darkseid. He is the only one of the New Gods that is truly fit for battle, and to the majority of the New Gods, war is what Orion does best. We then cut to Orion that's on a mining planet, just basically beating the dog shit out of all of the parademons that have no place to go now that Darkseid's dead. It kind of shows Orion having to take out this frustration and anger and pent up emotions that have been mounting in the wake of Darkseid's death. Just as he beats the last parademon, Highfather contacts him via Mother Box and tells him of this prophecy. The perspective then changes over to Scott Free, which is Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle and Big Barda now live in Glendale, California with their new baby, Olivia Liv Free. Now, I did see that a lot of people were relatively confused regarding this child. Some thought that this was the prophesized baby that Orion had to go after, but I promise you that's not the case. Others thought that this is the same child of Tom King's Mr. Miracle run in 2017, and that's not the case either. If you're going into the series, you do need to understand that the Mr. Miracle series from 2017 takes place in an alternate reality, and spoilers, it definitely has to be an alternate reality. So anyways, it shows that Scott and Barda are experiencing the early steps of being new parents and being completely exhausted. And Scott goes outside for a minute of a reprieve, and he's quickly met by Orion. Orion then tells Scott of the prophecy and the orders from Highfather to kill this new child because they don't know if this child will be worse than Darkseid. So it gives Orion the "would you kill baby Hitler" thought experiment. And when he's told to by the leader of New Genesis, he might have to. So he's going to Scott because Mr. Miracle is the super escape artist. And this kind of plays on that concept with Orion asking Scott to allow for this child to escape his pursuit. Orion doesn't want to do this. And I think that a lot of people have misunderstood this and thought of him as being bloodthirsty to enact the will of Highfather. But that's not who Orion is, and Ram V and Evan Cagle understand that. That's why this scene is so important, because we're able to see both of these characters, two men, brothers of responsibility. Scott being responsible for his newfound family, and Orion just wanting to do good. But even Orion doesn't believe that this is a harmless act, and he doesn't want to kill this child. He's asking Scott to save the child so he can save himself. It's deeply poetic, especially hearkening back to Jack Kirby's New Gods. What people might not understand is that while Orion is the son of Darkseid, life is more powerful than anti-life, and he's trying to fight that urge. When I spoke to Ram V about the motivations for both Scott Free and Orion, and what led him to make this decision for their path going forward, as well as putting them at odds, he said,
I said at the very beginning this story was on a deeper level about fatherhood and parenthood in general. Part of that is also exploring the responsibilities, lessons, and traumas that parents leave their kids with. And this scene, chemistry in particular, seemed to me to be a perfect place to explore that. There are two characters, both inextricably changed by the actions of their parents and still carrying the burden of those actions. And it shows through in everything they do. Both Scott and Orion are trapped by their legacies. Orion is unable to escape his true parentage, forever seen in the light of being Darkseid's son, and so perhaps dogmatically driven to follow Highfather's command as a way to push back on that. Scott, on the other hand, is much more cynical of gods and heroism, since it was a heroic god that essentially left him to face terrible tortures as a kid. But he too is unable to get away from it, as he's pulled into this situation because surely in trying to be a decent man and overcome his traumatic childhood, surely he could not let another child go through something similar. So you see, in a way, they're both struggling with something similar, and that's such an interesting, dramatic thing to place these characters essentially in collaboration, fighting a similar past, but also in opposition, because doing what they need to do involves going up against each other, and that's drama.
In the last section, we cut to India, where a family of 3, a mother, a father, and a child, are being pursued by Black Ops soldiers. They're tracking this family and chasing them through the forest with their intent to kill this child. But it's when they take aim that's important. One of the soldiers says the name Mr. Lord, and getting approval to make that kill shot. We then cut to a man that's within silhouette approving this shot. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's been confirmed that this Mr. Lord is actually Maxwell Lord. He's kind of one of the more complex villains within the DCU, but suffice to say, I wasn't expecting Max Lord, and I don't think anybody else was either. Max did have a relationship with both Scott Free and Big Barda within the Justice League International series, so it's very interesting that Ram V decided to bring Max Lord over into this series. And it also begs the question, why is Maxwell Lord even involved in this conflict? So after one of the soldiers actually takes the shot, they accidentally hit the father, and that's when the child actually embodies the powers of a new god. And it shows that this child is the prophecy. And this is the one that not only Orion is going after, but Scott Free is hoping to save. So now somehow even humanity knows of this new prophecy. So maybe in issue 2 we'll find out how Max Lord actually finds out about this prophesized child. Alright everybody, that's going to be enough of my report for this issue. If you haven't read issue 1 yet, first off, what are you doing? And secondly, you should probably get on that as well. And don't forget to pick up issue 2 January 15th. And I'll see you next time for Motherbox News.